Amanda, it's me. I'm out now. I've been thinking about you every day, every night. We got unfinished business. I need to see you. Come on now, baby girl. You know where to find me.
Amanda McClure ignored her father's calls at first. Maybe she felt it. Something wasn't right. Maybe she knew what he really wanted. But when the money ran out, she had no choice. Amanda was about to step into a nightmare, one that would end in blood, betrayal, and an unthinkable crime. But to understand what happened, we need to go back to the beginning. Addiction has a way of pulling people into dark places. And for Amanda McClure, meth had become more than a habit. It was survival. She and her boyfriend, John McGuire, had been using for months, trapped in the vicious cycle of highs and withdrawals, of desperation and fleeting relief. But as any addict will tell you, the worst feeling isn't just running out of drugs. It's knowing that the sickness is coming, that there's no way to stop it. For weeks, Amanda had been dodging someone. Her father, Larry McClure, had been reaching out since the day he got out of prison. He needed to see her. He wouldn't say why, just that it was urgent, that it was important. And there was something about the way he said it, something that didn't sit right. So Amanda ignored the calls, the messages. But Larry was persistent. He always had been. But when the meth ran out, ignoring him was no longer an option. Withdrawal is an unforgiving thing. It gnaws at you, turns your own body against you, the shakes, the chills, the desperation. Amanda and John felt it closing in. Then, in that haze of craving and sickness, she mentioned it. Her father, his messages, the fact that he had been insisting she come stay with him. And suddenly, John had an idea. Maybe this wasn't a bad thing. Maybe Larry had what they needed. Maybe, just maybe, there'd be plenty of meth. So John did what any addict in withdrawal might do. He started convincing Amanda that this was a good idea, that there was no harm in visiting, that Larry was family after all, that if nothing else, at least they'd get what they needed to keep the sickness away a little longer. And so they went. Amanda didn't know exactly what her father wanted, but something in the back of her mind told her this wasn't just about family. And once they stepped inside that house, there was no way out. If you're captivated by true crime stories and want to stay updated on the darkest cases, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We release in-depth crime documentaries just like this one, uncovering the chilling details behind real-life mysteries. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button now. 38-year-old John Thomas McGuire wasn't running toward a new life. He was running to keep the one he had from slipping away. Meth had a hold on him. It dictated where he went, who he trusted, and the choices he made. And in early 2019, those choices would lead him straight to the wrong place, with the wrong people. John wasn't always this man. He was a father of 5, a man who once had dreams and responsibilities. But addiction doesn't just steal your health, it takes everything. The job, the home, the people who once loved you. Over time, John's life unraveled. His children were left behind as the drug became his only priority. And with that came the arrests, the mistakes, the time spent in and out of the system. He had a record, nothing violent, nothing that made him a monster, but enough to show the path he had been on. Possession, theft, the kind of charges that tell a story of desperation, of a man who had burned through every bridge and was just trying to get by one high at a time. And then he met Amanda McClure. She understood him in a way few others did, not because they shared dreams, but because they shared a craving. Meth didn't just bring them together, it was the glue that held them there. He was in love. She understood him in a way most people don't. They were bound by addiction, by the highs that erased the pain and the lows that made them inseparable. But addiction is unforgiving. The money ran out, the drugs ran out, and the sickness set in. The withdrawals were creeping in, making their skin crawl, making them desperate. And that's when Amanda told John about the messages. Messages from her father, Larry McClure. Amanda had spent most of her life without Larry. He had never been a real father to her. She was raised in foster care, growing up without his influence, without his guidance. By the time he reached out to her, she was already an adult, already deep in the life she had chosen. And after spending years behind bars, Suddenly, he wanted back in. She wasn't inclined to see him. Why would she be? This wasn't a man she knew, not really, and something about the way he kept insisting made her uneasy. But when you're desperate, when the sickness is setting in, sometimes you make deals with the very people you swore you'd never speak to again. John saw an opportunity. Larry had resources, and more than anything, Larry had meth. At least, that's what they convinced themselves. If they went to see him, maybe they'd get what they needed to make it through another day, another week. Maybe this was the best move after all. So John did what addicts do. He rationalized it. He convinced Amanda. He told her it would be fine, that it made sense. That family was family, and if nothing else, they'd walk away with what they needed to get through the worst of it. But John McGuire didn't see the trap. He didn't see the danger. He didn't see that from the moment he and Amanda stepped into that house, he was never meant to leave. 31-year-old Amanda Michelle Naylor McClure's life was a tapestry woven with threads of abandonment, addiction, and alienation. Born to Larry Paul McClure Sr., her early years were marred by instability. At the tender age of 9, her father's incarceration for sexual assault led to her placement in foster care, severing familial bonds and planting seeds of resentment and mistrust. Raised by adoptive parents, Alan and Gwen Holm, Amanda's new environment offered structure, but the shadows of her past loomed large. As she transitioned into adulthood, the allure of methamphetamine became her escape, a potent remedy that numbed old wounds but introduced new demons. Her addiction led her down a path of poor choices and transient relationships. It was during this tumultuous period that she met John McGuire. Their shared dependency on meth forged a bond built more on mutual need than genuine affection. Despite her estrangement from Larry, Amanda's circumstances grew increasingly desperate. Financial hardships and the relentless grip of addiction left her vulnerable. Larry, recently released from prison, began reaching out, a father seeking reconnection, or perhaps something more sinister. After John's convincing, Amanda told herself that maybe her father wasn't as bad as she had always thought. Maybe people changed. Maybe, after all these years, Larry McClure was finally trying to be a real father. The years of separation, the lack of contact, it all started to feel like just another unfortunate part of life, not something to fear. And so she gave in. It wasn't just about the meth anymore. It was about the possibility that just maybe she had been wrong about him. In early February 2019, Amanda and John set off for West Virginia. Their car didn't make it. Stranded in Indiana, they had no choice but to call Larry for help, and he came. He and Amanda's sister, Anna, drove hours to pick them up, bringing them to the secluded home in Sky Gusty, West Virginia. 32-year-old Anna Marie Chowdhury's life was a mosaic of contradictions. Born to Larry Paul McClure Sr., her early years were marked by instability and absence. Like her sister Amanda, Anna experienced the void left by their father's incarceration, leading to a childhood spent in foster care and away from familial anchors. Despite these challenges, Anna sought normalcy. She pursued education, engaged in community activities, and endeavored to build a life distanced from her tumultuous past. Yet, the shadows of her upbringing loomed large, influencing her choices and relationships. In the years leading up to 2019, Anna reconnected with her father, Larry. This renewed relationship was complex, intertwining familial bonds with unresolved traumas. The dynamics within the family were further complicated by Larry's manipulative tendencies and the latent influence he wielded over his daughters. On a cold day in early February 2019, Anna received a call from Larry. He spoke of Amanda and her boyfriend, John McGuire, stranded in Indiana after their car broke down. They needed help. Despite any reservations she may have harbored, Anna agreed to accompany her father on the hours-long drive to retrieve them. As they traveled to Indiana, Anna's thoughts were a whirlpool of emotions. The prospect of reuniting with her sister after years apart was both comforting and unsettling. Memories of their fragmented childhood resurfaced, mingling with the uncertainty of the present situation. Upon reaching the stranded couple, the reunion was tinged with an uneasy warmth. Amanda and John, weary from their ordeal, expressed gratitude. The journey back to Sky Gusty, West Virginia, was filled with tentative conversations as the sisters reacquainted themselves and introduced John into the familial fold. Back at Larry's secluded home, the atmosphere was deceptively serene. The siblings shared stories, reminisced about fleeting moments of their shared past, and discussed hopes for the future. Yet, beneath this veneer of normalcy, undercurrents of tension and unresolved issues simmered. Anna's presence in the house was both a bridge to familial connection and a witness to the unfolding dynamics between Larry, Amanda, and John. Her role in the ensuing events would become a testament to the profound and often perilous influence of family ties, especially when entwined with manipulation and latent darkness. Unbeknownst to John, his arrival at the McClure household marked the beginning of a harrowing chapter. The convergence of these estranged family members, each carrying their own scars and secrets, set the stage for a series of events that would unravel the very fabric of their lives. In this secluded enclave, the boundaries between love, loyalty, and malevolence would blur, leading to actions that defy comprehension. The presence of Anna, the dutiful daughter seeking connection, would soon intertwine with a narrative of manipulation, betrayal, and unimaginable horror. For the first few days, everything felt normal, or at least normal for a house where everyone was strung out on meth. Days blurred into nights, conversations ran in circles. They spent their time doing what addicts do, getting high, coming down, and chasing the next hit. It was chaos in the way that felt fun at first. They weren't a family in the traditional sense, but for those first few days, they lived like one. They sat around, cracked jokes, shared stories, and let the drugs do their work, numbing out everything else. John fit right in. He was used to this life, the instability, the rush, the euphoria that turned every bad decision into a joke. And Amanda, she was happy, or at least as happy as someone who hadn't been sober in months could be. Anna was there too, watching. She had her own reasons for sticking around. Maybe it was the drugs. Maybe it was family loyalty. Maybe it was just easier to go along with everything than to question what they were all doing. Either way, she never asked too many questions. But then the mood shifted, and it started with something simple, something that should have been a happy moment. At some point during those drug-fueled days, John McGuire pulled Larry aside. He told him that he loved Amanda, that he wanted to marry her. Maybe he thought it was a harmless conversation. Maybe he believed it was the right thing to do, the honorable thing. After all, Larry was her father, and asking for a father's blessing, that's what a good man would do, right? But the reaction he got wasn't what he expected. Larry didn't smile. He didn't pat John on the back or shake his hand. He didn't even speak. Instead, Anna would later recall that her father went into what she called a quiet rage. He didn't yell, didn't lash out, but something changed. He sat there, staring, stewing in something dark, something no one else in that house could fully understand. Then he started taking Amanda aside, pulling her into private conversations, just the two of them, again and again. Anna noticed it, noticed the way he was always calling Amanda away, speaking to her in low tones, shutting the rest of them out. But she didn't ask questions. She didn't want to know. And maybe it was easier that way. 55-year-old Larry Paul McClure Sr.'s life was a tapestry woven with threads of crime, manipulation, and a chilling absence of remorse. Now, Amanda and Anna hadn't grown up with their biological father, and there was a reason for that. Larry McClure had only recently been released after serving more than 17 years in prison for sexually abusing a young relative. His crime was horrifying enough to sever ties between him and his daughters, leaving them to be raised in foster care far from his influence. In 2014, Larry was convicted in Louisiana for attempted second-degree murder and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. The court documents paint a grim picture. A man entangled in violent crime, undeterred by the law, and unrepentant in his actions. His criminal history was not confined to a single state. Records from Kentucky's Department of Corrections reveal a pattern of felonious behavior, including a 2-year sentence for a Class D felony. Each conviction added another layer to the portrait of a man for whom boundaries held little meaning. Upon his release, Larry sought to rebuild his life, but the shadows of his past loomed large. His demeanor was a paradox, a facade of charm masking a core of manipulation. Those who encountered him sensed an underlying menace, an unpredictability that kept them on edge. To his daughters, Amanda and Anna, he was an enigma. Absent for much of their childhood due to his incarceration, His sudden re-entry into their lives brought a complex mix of hope, resentment, and unease. His attempts to reconnect were tinged with an unsettling intensity, a possessiveness that blurred the lines between fatherly concern and something far more sinister. When Larry learned of Amanda's predicament, stranded and vulnerable, he seized the opportunity to reassert his influence. Enlisting Anna's assistance, he embarked on the journey to retrieve them, his mind undoubtedly weaving plans beyond mere familial reunion. During the drive, his demeanor was inscrutable. Conversations were superficial, masking the deeper currents of his thoughts. To Anna, he may have appeared as a father striving to mend broken bonds, but beneath that veneer lay a calculating mind, assessing how best to manipulate the unfolding circumstances to his advantage. As they arrived at the secluded home in sky-gusty West Virginia, Larry's presence cast a long shadow. The house, nestled away from prying eyes, became a crucible where his true nature would soon reveal itself. The stage was set for a series of events that would blur the lines between victim and perpetrator, love and control, life and death. In the days that followed, the veneer of normalcy would erode, exposing the darkness that festered beneath. Larry's influence, subtle yet pervasive, would steer the course of their lives toward an unimaginable abyss. For days, the house in Sky Gusty had been a place of drug-fueled chaos. Meth had turned the days into a blur, wild conversations, laughter that faded as quickly as it came, and the kind of reckless energy that only addiction can fuel. But something had changed. The mood was different now, and at the center of it was Larry McClure. Larry had spent the last few days pulling Amanda aside, speaking to her in hushed tones, keeping her close. No one knew what they talked about. Anna noticed, but she didn't ask. Maybe she didn't want to know. And John? John was just trying to keep the party going, oblivious to the darkness closing in around him. And then, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2019, Larry suggested they play a game, a trust game. It sounded harmless enough, just another ridiculous idea in a house where nothing made sense anymore. But it wasn't harmless. It was never meant to be. They tied John up. At first, maybe he thought they were just messing around, maybe he even laughed. But as the minutes passed, as the grip on the ropes tightened, as the energy in the room shifted, he realized this wasn't a game, this was something else. Then Larry began interrogating him. Who are you? John tried to tell him that he was indeed just John McGuire, even offering to hand over his social security card to prove it. The first hit came fast, a wine bottle to the head. The glass shattered, but the attack didn't stop. Blow after blow rained down on John as he struggled, his body unable to fight back against the meth still running through his system. But that wasn't working. Larry kept insisting that John was a federal agent. When John would not confess to what he was being accused of, one or all three of them would beat him. Blood pooled, his breathing grew ragged, and then they took it further. Larry injected John with meth, a dose meant to weaken him to keep him from fighting back, and as he lay there, bleeding, slipping in and out of consciousness, the real horror began. Amanda was there, watching, participating. She held him down as Larry tightened a plastic bag over his head, as he gasped, as he thrashed, as he stopped moving. John McGuire was dead, and no one in that house seemed to care. Both Anna and Amanda would later testify that their father was extremely jealous of Amanda. Amanda even said that her father killed John because my dad didn't want anyone else near me. Larry had likely been planting the idea that John was a police informant into Amanda's mind in order to get her to go along with his plan. Under the influence of meth, it's not hard to get someone worked up into a state of near-delusional, violent paranoia. They buried him in a shallow grave in the backyard, the earth barely concealing the horror of what had just happened. They moved on like nothing had changed. They got high, they ate, they laughed, but in the ground behind them, John's body remained, a brutal reminder of how far they had fallen. But it wasn't over, not yet, because within days they would go back, they would dig him up, and what they did next was even worse. For most people, burying a body is the end of a crime, the final step. The moment you try to move on, to pretend it never happened. But for Larry McClure, Amanda, and Anna, it wasn't over. It was never over. Just days after killing John McGuire, they went back. They dug him up. And the reason? It was as disturbing as the crime itself. Larry wasn't satisfied. Maybe it was paranoia, the creeping fear that someone would find the grave. Maybe it was control, because the act of killing John wasn't enough. He needed to desecrate him too. Or maybe, and this is the most terrifying part, maybe he just wanted to see the body again. They unearthed John McGuire's body, pulling it from the dirt where they had left him. And then they did the unthinkable. They dismembered him, piece by piece, cutting apart the man they had already stolen life from. It wasn't enough to bury him. They needed to destroy him. And then, when it was done, they buried him again. This time spread out, scattered. They wanted to make sure that if someone ever found him, they wouldn't know who he was. Immediately afterward, Larry and Amanda, his daughter, began what Anna described as a relationship. According to the criminal complaint filed by West Virginia police, it was a sexual relationship. But even that wasn't enough for Larry. No, he still had one more thing to do, one more step in this twisted plan. Less than a month after murdering John McGuire, he took Amanda across state lines, and there, in a courthouse in Virginia, she became his wife, with Anna serving as a witness. Because incestuous marriage is illegal in Virginia, Amanda wrote a fake name in the line for father of the bride. There are crimes that shock you, crimes that make you question humanity. But then there are crimes like this, the kind that make you wonder, how deep does the darkness really go? John McGuire's murder remained a secret, buried, both figuratively and literally, beneath the dirt of Sky Gusty, West Virginia. Months passed. John McGuire had vanished without a trace. His family continued searching, posting updates, asking questions, but no answers came. Meanwhile, in the quiet town of Sky Gusty, Amanda and Larry lived undisturbed, their twisted secret buried beneath layers of deception and dirt. Amanda kept cashing John's Social Security checks. For them, his death was nothing more than an opportunity, another resource to keep their drug-fueled existence going. The world had forgotten about John McGuire, and for a while it seemed like they had gotten away with it. But as with most crimes, it wasn't the murder itself that led to the downfall of the killers. It was something far more mundane. Larry McClure and Amanda left West Virginia behind. They moved to Kentucky, living together as husband and wife. But there was something Larry had failed to do, something simple, something required of him by law. He had failed to register as a sex offender. It was a routine check, a name in a database, a missing update, and that was all it took for Kentucky law enforcement to come knocking. Larry was taken into custody. At first, it was just a paperwork violation, nothing that would have drawn major attention, but then he started talking. Nobody had even asked him about John McGuire. They didn't even know they were supposed to. But Larry, sitting there in that cold interrogation room, decided to confess. And he didn't just admit to the murder. He detailed it, every gruesome, horrifying step. He didn't hesitate. He didn't try to protect anyone. In fact, he did the opposite. Larry threw his daughters under the bus, painting Amanda as the mastermind, claiming that she had planned the entire thing, that he had just gone along with it. And then he did something even more damning. He gave them the coordinates, exact GPS coordinates, the precise location of John McGuire's body buried in that backyard in Sky Gusty. Detectives in West Virginia followed the lead. They dug where Larry told them to dig, and there, just as he had described, they found John. What was left of him. In an instant, what had once been a missing person case turned into something far darker. The truth was out. The arrests were coming. And Larry McClure, whether out of guilt, self-preservation, or sheer malice, had just sealed his own fate. Along with Amanda's and Anna's. They had gotten away with it for months, but in the end, it wasn't an investigation that brought them down. It wasn't a witness or a slip-up. It was Larry himself, the man who had orchestrated the crime, who ensured that all three of them would soon be facing justice. After Larry McClure's confession and the subsequent discovery of John McGuire's remains, the wheels of justice began to turn swiftly. Arrest warrants were issued for all involved. Larry McClure, already in custody, faced charges of first-degree murder. His daughters, Amanda McClure and Anna Marie Chowdhury, were apprehended soon after, each charged with their roles in the heinous crime. In August 2019, Larry McClure appeared before the court, choosing to represent himself. He he pled guilty to first-degree murder. In a chilling statement, he admitted to orchestrating the murder of John McGuire, showing no remorse for his actions. The judge's sentence was swift and final. Larry McClure was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Amanda McClure, following in her father's footsteps, pled guilty to second-degree murder in July 2020. During her sentencing, she addressed the court, her voice trembling. "I can't bring John back. This is my fault. I wish I could take it all back. But apologies could not undo what had been done." The judge, considering the gravity of her actions, handed down a 40-year prison sentence, a long but inevitable consequence of her choices. Anna Marie Chowdhury, the last to face justice, pled guilty to second-degree murder in January 2021. She recounted the events leading to McGuire's death, detailing the gruesome trust game that culminated in his murder. "We restrained him, injected him with methamphetamine, and ended his life. It was a plan devised by our father." Her words sealed her fate. In April 2021, Anna was sentenced to 40 years in prison, the maximum for her charge. This tragic case serves as a haunting reminder of how manipulation, addiction, and familial bonds can intertwine to lead to unthinkable acts. The McGuire family, forever scarred by this loss, continues to seek solace in the justice served. But for John's mother, Karen Smith, no sentence could ever be enough. "I have to live with this every day. My son is gone and nothing can bring him back. The people responsible took more than his life. They took a part of all of us." Her words, spoken at the sentencing hearing, captured the deep sorrow that rippled through John's loved ones. In Sky Gusty, West Virginia, the town where the crime occurred, residents struggled to comprehend the sheer brutality of what had happened in their quiet community. "It's hard to wrap your head around it," one local said. "You think you know your neighbors, your community, and then something like this happens. It's shaken us all." The incestuous relationship between Larry and Amanda McClure only added to the shock, making the case one of the most disturbing in recent history. Throughout the legal proceedings, the accused displayed varying degrees of remorse. Amanda McClure, during her sentencing, addressed the court and John's family, saying, "I can't undo what I've done. I wish I could take it all back. I'm so sorry." But for many, her regret meant little in the face of such horrific betrayal and brutality. Larry McClure showed no remorse at all, and Anna, whether she was a victim of manipulation or willing participant, remains a lingering question. But while justice was served, questions remain. What drove this family to such depravity? Were there warning signs that could have prevented this tragedy? The community continues to search for answers, hoping to find understanding in the face of the incomprehensible. As time passes, the memory of John McGuire lives on in the hearts of those who loved him. He was not just a victim in a gruesome crime. He was a father, a friend, a man whose life was stolen in the most unimaginable way. His story remains a tragic reminder of how addiction, manipulation, and unchecked evil can destroy lives. The murder of John McGuire is more than just another crime story. It is a tale of addiction, manipulation, and a level of depravity that shakes us to our core. A man who trusted the wrong people. A father who should have protected his daughters but instead led them down a path of destruction. A crime that, once unearthed, exposed horrors beyond imagination. In the end, justice was served, or at least as much justice as the system could provide. Larry McClure will never walk free again. Amanda and Anna will spend decades behind bars. But is that enough? Did justice truly prevail? Or is this just another reminder that sometimes the worst monsters aren't strangers in the night, but the people we trust the most? This case also highlights the devastating effects of addiction. Methamphetamine played a major role in the decisions made that night. It clouded judgment, fueled violence, and turned a family home into a place of horror. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, there is help available. The National Substance Abuse Agency provides resources for those battling addiction. If you or someone you love is in danger, don't wait until it's too late. Beyond addiction, this case also raises deeper, more unsettling questions. How does a family become capable of something like this? How does a father convince his own daughters to kill for him? And most chilling of all, was this the first time Larry McClure acted on his darkest desires? Or just the first time he got caught? Evil doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it's invited in. And sometimes it's born right inside the home. And if you're fascinated by true crime, Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss an upload. We have more gripping stories coming soon, shedding light on cases that deserve to be told. Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.